I want to show you a very powerful tool if you plan to monetize your app and you need to work with paywalls. This tool is called Superwall and it will allow you to easily add a paywall to your app and put some of its features behind that paywall. But it will also allow you to update your paywall without needing to release a new version of your app on the App Store. Before we get started, full disclosure, this video is sponsored and has been made in collaboration with Superwall. So for this video, I've built an app that you're probably familiar with if you follow my content. It's an app that queries the movie database API in order to display a list of the most top-rated movies of all time. And when you select a movie, you go to a details screen where you can read the full overview and see the cast. And as you can see, there's also a button to watch the movie. And as you can imagine, this is from this button that will be displaying a paywall. And I also want to show you a special file that I've added to this Xcode project and that you might not be familiar with. So it's this file, which is called a StoreKit configuration file. And it's basically a file that you can create inside Xcode in order to describe which are the in-app purchases available inside your app. And when you build from Xcode, it will make these in-app purchases available. So it's essentially a way to mock an in-app purchase without having to use the actual in-app purchase from App Store Connect. It's extremely convenient when you're doing development. And here is going to be super useful because it will allow us to mock an in-app purchase without actually having this app be registered on App Store Connect. So now let's go ahead and add a paywall to this app using Superwall. So the first step to using Superwall is to add the Superwall SDK to your project. So you add it just like you would with any Swift package. So you do file add package dependencies, then you paste the URL of its GitHub repository and you add the package. So it's going to fetch it and we're going to add it to the target, which is the app that I have in my Xcode project. By the way, if you don't use SPM and you use CocoaPods, the Superwall SDK also supports CocoaPods. Now that I've added the package to my Xcode project, like with many SDKs, the next step is to initialize the SDK. Since I'm using a SwiftUI app, the easiest place to do it is within the init of the entry point of my app. But if you are using UIKit, as you can imagine, you would initialize the SDK inside your app delegate. So I'm going to import Superwall kit right here, and I'm going to call the method to initialize the SDK. So this method is called configure, and it's declared on the type Superwall. So I do superwall.configure, and I need to write my API key. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. So here's my API key, and let me just reformat this call. Okay, so the SDK has been initialized, and we are now ready to show our first paywall. So we're going to need to configure that paywall, and for this, we're going to move to Safari to the Superwall dashboard. So this is the Superwall dashboard. This is what you will have access once you've onboarded yourself on Superwall. And on this dashboard, you can see that you have a list of templates of already pre-made paywalls that you can use. And these templates, they are built from the paywalls of successful subscription apps on iOS. But for this video, I've already pre-built a few paywalls. You can see them right here, and you can see that they match what I'm going to offer in terms of feature, which is to be able to watch a movie. So let's take the example of this simple paywall and let's see what's inside of it. As you can see, when we open the paywall, we gain access to an editor that allows us to change the content of the paywall. And I'll show you a demo of that just later. But first, I want to show you this part, which is where the product associated with the paywall is configured. And by product, I mean the App Store Connect product, so the in-app purchase. And you can see that here the product is called monthly subscription. And if I go back to Xcode, as you can imagine, it's the same name that I've used here for the product ID in my StoreKit configuration file. And so this is how you make the link between what you've declared in App Store Connect and what Superwall will be able to use and present to the user. So now the question is, how do we make it so that this paywall is shown inside the app when we click on the button Watch a Movie? For this, I'm going to exit the paywall editor and I'm going to create a campaign. So I'm going to do new campaign right here. So I'm going to give it a name. It will be watch movie. Let's create this campaign. And the first thing you want to do when you create a campaign is to select what's called a placement. A placement is the place inside your app that will be triggering the campaign and, by consequence, showing the paywall. You can see on the list that there are already some pre-built placements available, like when the app is launched or when a deep link is opened. But I want to create my own custom placement, which I'm going to call campaign_trigger. So let me create it and add it to the campaign. So now my campaign has a placement. Next, it needs to have a paywall. So for this, I'm going to click on the audience all users, which means all users that enter this campaign. And I'm going to add a paywall to the campaign. So I'm going to choose my simple paywall that we've seen just before. And right now, my campaign has been configured. So when the placement campaign trigger is triggered inside the app, all users will be matched with this paywall, simple paywall. So we are almost ready to show the paywall. The only thing we need is to actually add this trigger, campaign_trigger, inside the iOS app. And for this, let's go back to Xcode. So I'm going to go into the code of my movie details view. I'm going to import Superwall in this view. And let's find the button that shows watch a movie. So this button. And instead of the command that says show a paywall, we are going to actually show a paywall. So for this, I will do superwall.shared.register. And I'm going to register the event with the name campaign_trigger. And that's it. With this line of code added, the app has been configured to show the paywall. So I'm going to run it again in the simulator and we'll see what happens. So my app has been rebuilt. And now if I select a movie in the list and I click on the button watch, as you can see, a paywall is indeed successfully presented by Superwall. So that's pretty cool. However, if you click on the button continue to purchase the in-app purchase, you can see that the product doesn't appear. So rest assured, there is no problem with Superwall here. The problem is actually on my side, but I wanted to show it to you because it's very easy for this bug to happen. And if you don't know how to fix it, it can be extremely confusing. So let's have a look at what's happening. What's happening is that indeed in Xcode, I've created this stored configuration file to mock my in-app purchase, but I've actually forgotten to tell Xcode to use the file when it's running the app in the simulator. It's very easy to forget to tell Xcode to use the file, so I wanted to make sure that I show you how to tell Xcode, please use this file. So you do it through the compilation scheme. So let's edit the scheme right here. And in the options, you can see that you can select which file you want to use. And so I'm going to create the one that I've just created and shown you. So now it's been configured. I'm going to close the scheme and I'm going to rebuild and relaunch the app one more time. And this time, if I select a movie, tap on watch and click on continue, you can see that this time the product is successfully appearing. And if I click on subscribe, then I get the view to make the actual purchase with my App Store account. I won't be making the purchase just right now because first I want to show you a few other things before. Remember in the intro when I told you that with Superwall, you will be able to change your paywall without needing to release a new version of your app on the App Store? Let's try it. So you can see that for now, the paywall says find the best movies to watch immediately. Let's try and change that text. So for this, I'm going to go back into Safari. I'm going to hide the simulator for now. I'm going to go into my paywall and I'm going to edit it. So I'm going to select this text and instead of immediately, I'm going to say right now, which conveys the same ID but with a slightly different copy. I'm going to publish my changes. So now that my changes have been saved, just to make sure, I'm going to go back to my campaign right here and make sure that indeed the paywall has been updated. So you can see that it's computing a new preview. So it shows that it's been updated and the preview will be available soon. So we can go back to Xcode right now. So I'm going back to Xcode and to the simulator, and I'm not going to rebuild my app because I don't need to rebuild it in order to see the new copy on the paywall. All I need to do is relaunch it. And the reason is that Superwall prefetches all of the paywall data when we initialize the SDK, and we do it at the launch of the app. So I've killed the app, I'm relaunching it, I'm going to reopen a paywall, and you can see that the change in the copy is now visible. So we've been able to update the content of a paywall without needing to release a new version on the App Store. And if you know the pain that it is to deal with a new release on the App Store, I'm sure that you understand how being able to do so opens a lot of cool new possibilities if you want to experiment a lot with the content of your paywalls. So we've been able to show a paywall. Now let's try to go a bit further and let's gate a feature behind a paywall. And by gating a feature behind a paywall, I mean that in order to access the feature, the user will need to subscribe to your subscription. So this is why we say that the feature is gated behind the paywall. So for this, I'm going to add a new feature to my app. So I'm going to create a new group. I'm going to call it movie player like this. Then I'm going to create a new SwiftUI view called movie player view inside this group. Now I'm just going to copy and paste the code so that we can save time. But as you can see, I'm not implementing a real movie player. This is just a placeholder with a text that says, if this was a real app, this is where you would watch the movie. And now let's see how we can gate this new movie player view feature behind our paywall. So for this, I'm going to go back to the code of my movie details view. And first, I'm going to add the necessary code in order to show the movie player view. So I'm adding an addState property that's going to control whether or not we are showing the movie player. And then, as you can imagine, I'm going to also add the code in order to show modally the movie player view. So that's it, the code is there. Now the question is, how do we configure the paywall so that when the user has subscribed to our subscription, we give access to the movie player feature? As it turns out, this is quite easy to do with Superwall. You just need to use another argument of the method register event, and this argument is called feature. And this argument is a closure inside which you can write the code that will contain the side effect to give access to the feature. So here, this side effect is taking the property show player and setting it to true. And that's it. We've made all the changes that were needed in order to gate the feature behind the paywall. So now let me rebuild the app so that we can try out this new behavior. So I'm going to select a movie, tap on watch, so it's showing me the paywall. I'm going to click on continue, and this time I'm going to make the subscription. So since everything is mocked locally, it's being done immediately and I don't need to enter any password or anything. And now the paywall has dismissed and the feature has been accessed by the user. And what's really nice is that from now on, since I'm subscribed, whenever I tap on the button, the feature will be immediately shown and the paywall will not be a blocker anymore. By the way, if you go back into Superwall and you check the details of the paywall, here in the settings, you will see that there are two modes for feature gating, gated and non-gated. So we've been using a paywall set to gated, which meant that the paywall had this behavior of the user needs to be subscribed in order to access the feature. And in code, it translates to the user needs to be subscribed for the closure feature to be executed. But you can also set the paywall to non-gated, and the difference in that case is that in code, the closure feature will be called whenever the paywall has dismissed, regardless of whether the user has subscribed or not. So when the paywall is set to gated, it's really gating the feature. You cannot access the feature without subscribing, but when it's set to non-gated, the paywall will simply show, but the feature will still be accessible whether or not the user has subscribed. And both of these modes make sense depending on what you want to do in the app. There are some features that you might want to make only accessible to paying users, and so you want to gate them behind a paywall. But some other features, you might just want to show a paywall on the user flow, but you don't want to make the subscription mandatory. And what's nice is that Superwall supports both ways of configuring a paywall. Okay, so I've showed you the basic use case of Superwall, but before we end this video, I also want to show you a more advanced use case where we're going to configure a different paywall to be shown to the user depending on the user's profile. In order to do this, I've added a very simple onboarding screen, which is going to allow us to collect data on the movie watching preferences of the user. So we're going to ask the question, how do you prefer to watch movies? And users will need to answer either by themselves or with family. And I want to point your attention to the code that's going to be triggered when either of these two buttons are going to be tapped by the user. You can see that in the action of the button, I'm calling the method setUserAttribute on Superwall. And in each case, I'm setting a value for the user attribute watch preference. It's going to be either by myself or with family. And finally, as you can imagine, I've also updated the entry point of my app in order to keep track of whether or not the user has seen the onboarding and to show the onboarding if the user has never seen it. So now let me reopen the simulator. I'm going to close the app and actually completely remove it from the simulator so that it's a clean slate. And I'm going to rebuild it and relaunch it. So as you can see, we are presented with the onboarding. So how do we prefer to watch movies? I'm going to select by myself for this example. And now that this user preference has been sent to Superwall, we can go back on the Superwall dashboard and edit the campaign in order to show a different paywall depending on which user preference has been set for the user. So let's open the campaign and we're going to configure this through the Audiences tab right here. So I'm going to keep the all users audience and I'm going to add a new audience segment. So I'm going to select this new segment and I'm going to add a filter. So the filter will be for the user property watch preference. You can see it's already available because Superwall knows about it since I've already sent it to Superwall. So I'm saying when watch preference is equal to a value, and this value, I can actually look for it. I have the value by myself already pre-filled because once again, I've already made the call that sent this value to Superwall. Now I'm going to click on save. And you can see that the name has been updated to user.watchpreferences is equal to by myself. So it's the name of this user segment. And we're going to change the paywall that's configured for this user segment. So I'm going to remove the simple paywall. I'm going to confirm it. And instead, I'm going to add the solo viewer paywall, which, as you can see in its visual, emphasizes the fact that the user is watching alone. And the idea is that since we're showing a visual that is closer to the user preferences, maybe there is a higher chance that the user will convert and buy the subscription. So at this point, we've configured everything we need to test this new behavior with my current user. But before we do, I'm going to add the second audience segment. So this one is going to also use the user property watch preference, but this time it will be for the other possible value. So with family, I'm going to save this second audience segment and I'm going to configure the correct paywall for it. So it will be the multi-viewer paywall. And you can see that this time the copy and the image is adapted in order to reflect that the user is watching with family. So now all the necessary changes have been made on Superwall. Let's go back to Xcode and let's relaunch the app in the simulator. So the app has been relaunched. It means that the Superwall SDK has been reinitialized and the changes to my campaign have been fetched locally. And so now I'm going to click on the watch a movie button and you can see that I indeed have the paywall that is meant for users that said that they prefer to watch movies alone. Of course, let's try also that the other path works correctly. So for this, I'm going to remove the app from the device. This way we will see the onboarding again. So this time I'm gonna choose with family. And if I navigate back to the paywall, you can see that the paywall has been adapted to the user profile because this time we're showing the paywall that emphasizes watching with a family. So that's it. It's the end of this demo of how you can use Superwall to easily integrate and remotely configure paywalls inside an iOS app. If you want to give Superwall a try, you have two links in the description, one for Superwall's website and the other to get the code of the app I've used for this demo. And on my end, I have a big thank you to Superwall for sponsoring this video and supporting my content creation. Thank you for watching and see you next time.